Okay.
Okay. Good day, all of you. And I know for those who are in Australia, it's a difficult time because of the lockdown. We in India have been experiencing it almost since more than 15 months, off and on lockdown. But here things are easing out. So we hope and pray that everywhere this phase passes away. And once again, we get back to normal. We really have to pray. And as well, along with praying, we have to take steps which are necessary for our own health and happiness and of that of others. And surprisingly, the topic of today, fire, can help us in that, in the sense that fire is in a way energy. And all of us are beings of energy. We human beings have energy. And the stronger our energy, the stronger our force, the stronger we are able to keep back the scourge, as we all know. So let us take this lesson from the talk today, that how fire, its powers, its blessings, and its energy can help us to heal the whole world. You may remember that last time we had started the topic on fire, and I'll just do a very quick recoup of what we had done within a couple of minutes, so that when we proceed, you are quite aware of where we are. So last time we had, after the introduction to fire and what the word fire means, and it is not just the blazing fire that we see or the embers, but it is anything in motion, energy. That is our Zoroastrian concept, original concept of fire, and the burning fire that we see is one of its many aspects. And we saw about the many myths about fire that people have about Zoroastrians and how it was dispelled. We also saw that Zoroastrian texts talk to us about 6 types of fire, and that includes different types of energies that is in the divine world, that is within us, that is in the atmosphere, in the plants, animals, etc., and of course in human beings. Then we knew that one of the most special types of fires were the spiritual fires, which just emerged before great kings in the past.
Dr. Ramiyar talks Sathayum.
And we knew that fire was venerated all through the civilization since the very ancient times, all through the history. And then at the end of last time's talk, we saw that why fire is regarded as the son of Aura Mazda, how it is a link and a medium, and how it is linked with Khore or Khorena, that is energy. See, the most important thing that I think we can take away from this talk is that fire and energy are two very closely interlinked. And our religion, when it talks of fire, it talks of energy, and energy in our religion is as important as fire. Today we are going to talk about something more about fire, that are the different grades of fire, how we bring about those grades by consecrating the fire, how fire is regarded as a king, a warrior, and a judge in Zoroastrian religion. Then something which is much overlooked is that fire and men are very closely correlated, and will bring about that correlation between fire and men. And since all of us recite the Atashnyas, we will briefly see what Atashnyas has to say about fire. And another overlooked thing is that fire is also a teacher, a silent teacher who gives us teachings, admonitions. So we will see what admonitions and teachings, which are quite symbolic, that the fire gives us. And we'll end with seeing what are a man's duty towards fire. That will be our conclusion for the day. So let us start with the grades of fire. Zoroastrian religion talks about 3 grades of fire: the Dadga fire, the Adaran fire, and the Atash Beram fire. Now, once again, in the first grade of fire, the Dadga fire, there are two groups in a way, or two types of Dadga fire. So, firstly, any fire that you light, a matchstick that you light, a stove that you light, a bonfire that you create, anything, any burning, blazing thing or an ember is a Dadga fire. But then that same Dadga fire is taken a step further and also established in a fire temple where the other grades of fires are not possible. So a minimal consecration, we will see that what that minimal consecration is. So that is another type of Dadga fire. So when we talk of Dadga fire, we have to be very clear that it is two types of Dadga fire. Then Adharan fire is the first step towards consecration of a fire, which we loosely call the Agyari. The Adharan fire is the fire which is there in most of the Agyari, though quite rarely in some Agyaris there is also the Dadga fire. In India, I am talking about India. But most Agyaris have the Adharan fire, and finally is the highest grade of fire, which we call the Atashberam fire. And we know that in the whole of India, there are only 8 such fires of the highest level. 8 Atashberams fire, 4 in Mumbai, 2 in Surat, 2 in Navsari, and the highest and the oldest one at Udwada, the Iran Shah. So in this way, whatever fires that we have can be divided into these 3 categories. Now, what is consecration? Because fires are generally graded on account of how much consecrated they are, how many rituals are performed on it. So consecration is a very old Indo-Iranian practice. Even the Indians and the Iranians, of course, to a great extent, did consecrate fires and put them on a higher pedestal. In a way, they made them from ordinary to divine, to sacred. Our Hindu brothers have a word for consecration for their temple idols, and they call them Pran Pratishtan. Pran Pratishtan is putting life in something that is not living. Pran Pratishtan. We, in a way, by consecrating the fire, which in Gujarati is referred to as Ijwanu. Our Parsi Gujarati word for consecration is Ijwanu, Ijaila Atashpacha. So, in a way, we are bestowing the fire with energy, power, life, consciousness when we consecrate a fire. So, a consecrated fire is a fire with a life and consciousness of its own. Now, let us talk of the first grade of fire, the Dadga fire. As I told you, we are not talking about here of any ordinary fire, but a fire with a minimal consecration, which can be put in a small fire temple, where it is not possible to have other grades of fires. So it can be consecrated by a simple jashan or a Bajdana ritual, or sometimes even by a collective atashnyas. Sometimes the whole Anjuman comes up together, recites atashnyas together. It may be 10, 20, 50, 100, whatever the number. And that is called the Dadga fire. So it has minimal consecration compared to the other 2 grades of fire. And this Dadga fire, it is not necessary to perform the boy rituals 5 times in a day. It could be performed once, twice, thrice, or even 4, 5 times, depending on the convenience. So a Dadga fire can be offered a boy rituals depending on the convenience. And of course, if a priest offers the boy, it is good. But if a priest is not able to offer the boy in a Dadga ritual, even a lay person, a Bedin, and that Bedin could be a gentleman or even a lady who is in a ritually pure condition and state, can give boy to this Dadga fire. So that is our first grade of fire. the Dadgah fire. And as we all know, in the past, almost all Parsi houses had a hearth fire, which was regarded as the Dadgah fire of the house. Though it was not consecrated as such, but since people of the house used to go towards it and pray in front of it, especially the Atashnyas. So scores and scores of Atashnyas were prayed at the home fire, on the home fire, and then it assumed a sacredness of its own. So a Dadgah fire is the first grade of fire. Then we come to the second grade of fire, which we call the Adaran fire. And the very word Adar means two things. One, Adar means fire itself. But over here, it does not mean just fire. It means fire dedicated to Adar Yazad. We know that Adar Yazad is the presiding Yazad over fire. So the second grade of fire, the Adaran fire, is dedicated to Adar Yazad. There is quite an elaborate way of establishing it. Firstly, fire is taken from the hearth fires of a priest, a soldier or a king or a warrior, a farmer, and any artisan. So fire is taken from the hearth or the home of these four people. Then it is purified. The process of purification is such that a pit is dug, the fire collected is placed in the pit, then a chamach with holes is held quite high over that fire. On it, shredded pieces of wood or sandalwood is kept, what we call tacho. And with the heat of that fire, the tacho burns on the chamach with holes. And that is called purification of the fire. So that fire is purified, and then over it, a pair of priests perform a yajashne ritual. This is done on all the four different fires collected from four places. Then collectively, two Vandidas are again performed on that collected fire, and thus we have the Adaran fire. And once consecrated, it is enthroned, and over it, it is compulsory to give boy 5 times in a day. If boy is not given 5 times in a day, then the status of Adaran fire is reduced. And it is necessary and compulsory that an ordained priest has to look after that fire. A Bedin or a lay person cannot look after a consecrated fire. In Bombay, some fire temples demand that a priest with Navar and Paratap should offer boy, and some fire temples have do not require a Maratab. Even a priest who has just undergone an hour is allowed to offer boy. But whatever it is, a fully ordained priest has to look after it and offer boy 5 times in the day at least. At least that is compulsory. So that is the Adaran fire. And the third type of fire is the Atashberam fire, the highest type of fire, only 8 of which exist in India today. So fire is collected from 16 different sources, purified a different number of times, ranging from 30 to 90, depending on from where the fire is collected. And then the equal number of Yajashne and Vandidad are performed over each fire. So you realize there's a very long drawn process, taking year or years, with several sets of priests, several pairs of priests performing those rituals. So the fire is collected from a house of a Zoroastrian, house of a dyer, a potter, a brickmaker, a bronze maker, a goldsmith, from mint where coins are minted, from a blacksmith, from a weapon maker, from an oven, from a brewer who brews liquor, from an army camp, from a shepherd's house, from a public bath. Nowadays, we generally don't have such public baths, but in the past, there were public baths also. And two very special type of fires in the Atashberam fire are fire from a burning corpse and fire from lightning. Now, of course, it would not be a Zoroastrian corpse burning. It would be a corpse of a Hindu, generally a non-Zoroastrian, a Hindu, which is burning, from which fire is taken, and that fire required the most purifications and most consecrations. And finally, the fire from lightning, the atmospheric fire. In our Irancha fire, we are told that Mohammed Neriosan Gaval and Ormazdiar Ramiyar invoke lightning to a place where wood was collected. But thereafter, in the rest of the seven Atashverams, fire was of lightning was collected from forest fires, taken to the house of a Bedin, and from there taken to the place where the Atashveram was consecrated. So, as we all now see, making a Atashveram is a very difficult and an intricate task, requiring in all 1132 performances of Ijashnis and Vandida by dozens and dozens of pairs of fully proficient Yozdatregar priests. And once this is consecrated, this fire is specially enthroned like a patsha, like a king, with an elaborate procession. And boy is offered in all the 5 days by priests who are of a very higher grade of power, who have undergone the Barashnum and who hold the Barashnum. That is the highest type of purification. Only such type of priests are allowed to enter into the sanctum sanctorum of the Atashveram and offer boy at the Atashveram. So we see all the three grades of fire are formed from consecration. It is the rituals which imbibe that fire with the sacred power, and then those fires are connected with different spiritual energies in the divine world. Now I'm just giving you a picture of one of the latest enthronement of a fire temple which happened at the Godrejbagh Agyari, which is called the Jokhi Agyari. See the number of people who are going in a procession which is led by priests. So you see priests in full priestly regalia holding weapons like guraj, swords, and even spears. They follow, they precede and follow the sacred fire, which in this case was brought from Navsari, a village of Navsari, to Bombay. But it was done in a full procession, and this will give you an idea that how a fire which is newly consecrated is also brought in a procession from the place where it is consecrated and enthroned, and where laity also go as a mark of respect of enthronement. You know, when coronations of kings and queens happen, what a grand event it is. So this event of the coronation of our Patsha Sahib in Agyaris and Atashveram is also a very grand event. Now, consecration, what does consecration do to the fire? The fire is taken to a higher level and it is connected with God's different energies at different levels. Now the consecrated fire of an Adaran or an Atashveram is now bestowed with the power of thinking, the power of seeing, and the power of hearing. So that's why we say that it has a life of its own, and that's why we should never make two fires out of one consecrated fire. Because it is like saying that we will cut a man into two to make two human beings. That is never possible. Similarly, cutting a fire, sacred fire into two is also not possible. So a sacred fire has a life and consciousness of its own. Now it has got a special mission, and that mission is to take our prayers. It is a faster process to take our prayers to the divine world and bring blessings from the divine world to us. And that's why uh, we, wherever those who are lucky enough, we go to a nearby fire temple and pray at the fire temple so that we are able to get greater blessings of the fire. Then we are also told that this same fire can give rewards and retributions like a king or a judge. And that's why we say that it is beneficial to stay as close to the fire temple as possible, because it gives blessings to all, irrespective of caste, color, and creed. But when you go into a fire temple, only a special type of ritually pure people can go into it. And there, the added advantage is that we believe that good spirits, yazats and ameshaspas, good souls and good pravashis are there in the fire temple. So there is an added benefit of going into fire temple. Presently, unfortunately, those who are living in Mumbai in the vicinity of the fire temples also are not able to go into the fire temple since a long time because of the COVID situation. But we believe that because the fire blesses all the everybody, so even if we don't go to a fire temple, it is okay. Its blessings will come to us because the sacred fire is still burning. Sandalwood is still offered to it, and blessings still come. Now, we often refer to fire, consecrated fire in an Agyari or Atashberam as a Padsha sign. Padsha means a king or an emperor. Why is he referred to as a Padsha? Because first of all, it has a throne. The stone Hindora is the throne of the sacred fire. So we are enthroning the fire. We use the word enthroning. The dome above the fire in the Kebla is signifies the sky and is the material jurisdiction of the fire. Then there is a canopy immediately above the fire, a metallic canopy. And that canopy is in a way the crown of the fire. Then, as we saw, fire is enthroned in a procession, followed by priests who, at that point of time, are the soldiers or ratheshtars of the fire. And that is why, at a certain point of time, after coming to India, for almost 1,000 years, the Iran Shah was the only sacred burning fire. And that's why we gave it the status of Iran Shah. Because we did not, our last king in Iran was Yazid Shariar. After that, we did not have a king in Iran. So we believed that this fire would serve the purpose of a Padsha of Iran for us in India. And that's why we call it, even today, Iran Shah, the Udwada Atashbera. Another title given to the fire is that of a Ratheshta. In the Atashnyas, we say, Takmem Hantem Ratheshtare. We give the fire the title of a warrior. Ratheshtar means a warrior. And that is because it fights Daruji. It fights unseen evil, which is there around in nature. And when the boy is given 5 times of the day in a fire temple, that is the particular time when the fire is active in fighting the negativities in nature. That does not mean it is not fighting the rest of the time. But these are the 5 specific times of the day when fire is performing the duty of a Ratheshta, a warrior. Then fire also has a role to perform of a judge. Even a king is a judge in a way, because people do go to the king with their complaints. So fire performs the role of the judge. In the last paragraph of the Atashnyas, the Attoyatren, we are told that fire punishes wrongdoers and rewards the good. In ancient fire, there was something called a fire ordeal. People who were guilty or who wanted to prove a point underwent a fire ordeal, which was generally undergoing it through molten metal or, believe it or not, by drinking sulfuric acid, by drinking liquid which was infused with sulfur. And if they were innocent, they were believed to be helped by the divine beings and come out of it. And today I am sure most of you Parsis know the word sogan. Those who know Gujarati know the word sogan. We say sogan kha jaun, tu sachu bole. Prove that you are saying the truth. And we use the term sogan kha. Now what is the word sogan kha? The word sogan comes from the Avesta word saukant. The Avesta word saukant means burning. In Atashnyas, we often use the word sauche buye, mat sauche buye. So the word saucha means burning, from which comes the word saukan, and from which comes the word sogan. So when you say ke sogan kha, it means that eat something which is hot to prove your innocence. Of course, nowadays we don't do that. But the word sogan has come from that. In our history, it is very well known that our Dastur Adarbat Marespan during the Sasanian times had molten metal poured over his chest to prove the efficacy of the Zoroastrian prayers and rituals. That also was a sort of a fire ordeal. And Prince Shavaks from the Kayanian dynasty, in the Shahnama, we are told that Prince Shavaks also underwent a fire ordeal to prove his innocence because his mother, his stepmother, Sodabe, used to put allegations on him and on his character, of which Shavaks was very innocent. So, in order to prove his innocence, in the Shahnameh, we are told that Shavaks went through burning blaze of wood. A huge pile of wood was erected and set to fire, and Shyavaks had to go on horseback. It may be almost say a couple of meters long, a few meters long. So he had to pass through this, and Shyavaks did this and came out unscathed. So in that instance, it was Shyavaks undergoing the fire ordeal. So in this way, we see that fire was used to prove the innocence of a person. And we are also told that at the time of renovation, that is at the time of the end of this world, fire will once again be asked to perform the role of a judge. And how will that be? That all the souls who have not yet reached Garotman, they will be asked to pass through a sort of a river. And that river would be of liquid. But depending on the guilt or the sin of the soul, the liquid in the river will become hot. So very sinful souls will feel it like it is they are passing through molten metal, very hot burning metal, which looks red and orangish. But those who are very slightly um, uh, found guilty, they will find that liquid as lukewarm milk. So it would be a relative judgment for the souls in the last instance. So all souls or many souls or most of the souls who are still not into Garotman will have to pass through this fire ordeal even at the end of time. So fire in that sense has a very important role to perform, that not only as a king but as a warrior and also as a judge. Now let us see a very interesting aspect of fire. How fire is so closely related with human beings. This does not occur to us very easily till we look at it in detail. First of all, fire is a living, breathing thing. Both human beings and fire are alive and require oxygen. They breathe oxygen to survive. Without oxygen, both fire and human beings die. Then both fire and human beings require fuel. We eat food, the fire eats wood or takes wood. That is the fuel of the fire. So both require this. Then both human beings and fire have physical and spiritual constituents. As I told you, fire also has a consciousness, a both, and we human beings also have a both or a consciousness. So we work at different levels, a physical level also and a ultra physical level also. Both of us transform matter into energy. When human beings eat food, we quickly transfer it to energy, which our body requires to function. And fire also, we know that most of the types of energy are made from burning things like burning coal, etc. So fire transforms wood or coal, that is a material thing, into a form of energy. Both are required in a ritual. Take any ritual, any Zoroastrian ritual. The presence of fire has to be there and the presence of a human being has to be there. Without a fire, without the human being, no ritual, no Zoroastrian ritual is complete. Then both are, as I said, physical and spiritual. There is part physical also and part spiritual also, and that is why both are links between the two worlds. We human beings can also link with the spiritual world, those staying in the physical world, and fire also, those staying in the physical world, can link itself to the spiritual world. Another striking similarity is that no two are ever the same. We know that no two human beings are ever the same, identical. And in the same way, the personality or the appearance of no two fires is ever the same. Then both of us can create another similar organism which is unique but not identical. That is from one fire, not a sacred fire. I'm not talking of a sacred fire, but from an ordinary fire, you can light another fire. And we also know that a human being can procreate a child. Both can procreate or create a similar being which is unique in itself, similar but not identical. The another important similarity is both a human being and a fire can be used for good or evil purposes. Though both are meant for being good, but still when Angramainyu takes them over, they are used for destructive purposes. So we know that even a man can become quite destructive, and even a fire can become quite destructive. And at that point of time, Zoroastrian religion teaches us to fight against that human being or that fire because it has been taken over by the evil, and that's why we are supposed to fight it. Fight the evil that is there within that because it is no more used for the purpose of goodness. Then, lastly, the last point is that both human beings and fire are called Ratheshtars, that is warriors. Warrior in a special way to fight evil. And only by fighting evil will the promised end of the world, which is called the Frashokereti. We even mention Frashokereti in the Atashnyas. That is the promised end of the world, an apocalyptic event after which everything will become Frasha, that is fresh and new, and there will be no evil left. But the responsibility of taking the material world towards Prashokarati is upon human being and fire. So both human being and fire have very important roles to perform in the physical material world. And in that sense, both are equally dependent on each other. Fire is dependent on a human being, and a human being is dependent on fire. Both are mutually dependent. Now, briefly, we will see what the Atashnyas has to say. So, Atashnyas begins with the Usmo Uzareshwa paragraph, in which we ask for help from the fire and in which we dedicate ourselves to serving the fire. Then there comes the Athro Auremazda Putra paragraph, in which several spiritual fires are remembered. To be precise, six spiritual fires are remembered in the Athro Auremazda Putra paragraph. Then comes the main part of the Atashnyas, the 10 paragraphs, which are taken from Yasnaha 62. These 10 paragraphs are divided into 4 parts. In the first part, that is paragraphs number 1, 2, and 3, it is we human beings who are wishing well to the fire. We are sending good wishes to the fire. So, what are we wishing? Firstly, we are wishing that the fire has good, willing, and loving offerings, that fire be worthy of worship in every house, that a pious and holy person looks after the fire, that proper fuel and incense is offered to the fire, and lastly, we express the desire that may this fire keep on burning till Prashokarati, because that is the mission of the fire, to burn till Prashokarati and take the material world to Prashokarati or Prashogarh. So, in the first 3 paragraphs, it is we human beings who are wishing well for the fire. Then in the next part, that is paragraph 4, 5, and 6, we start asking for boons from the fire. Dayao mein atash putra aure mazdao. Oh fire, do you give me? So, first of all, we are asking for a life full of happiness and prosperity. We are asking for exhilaration, intelligence, fluent tongue, soul consciousness, wisdom, and bravery. We are asking for an active and agile life. Most importantly, we are asking for a progeny who has innate wisdom and who can become a good leader and deliver people from distress. And we also ask for guidance and admonition from the fire so that our soul can progress. Now, what these admonitions are, we will see later on. But for now, we will just notice that this is one of the boons that we ask from fire, that, oh fire, when you are burning, do give me boons, teachings, and admonitions when I am looking at you. In the third part of the Atashnyas, which is paragraph 7 and 8, we are told that even fire expects something from us. And what is that something that fire is expecting? Fire is expecting good, willing, and loving offerings in the form of fuel, either ordinary wood or special wood like the sandalwood. And we are told that fire longs for this. Over here, fire and men are called friends. In this part of Atashnyas, fire and human beings are called friends. Hakhedra. The Avestan word is Hakhedra. So the fire looks towards the hands of the human being when it approaches it and longs that he has brought some gift for me. The specific words are, what gift has a walking friend brought for a silent sitting friend? Beautiful words. What gift the walking friend, that is a human being, has brought for the silent sitting friend? And in the last part of this 10 paragraph, that is paragraphs 9 and 10, we are told that fire gives blessings to the devotees. Whenever you pray to the fire, or whenever a ritual is performed for the fire, and whenever in that prayer or ritual, clean, dry, and properly inspected wood is offered to the fire, fire gives us blessings. And what are those blessings? The blessings are of plenty, prosperity, an active life, and a happy life. Urvaksh anguha, gaya jigayesha, tao kshapano yao juahi. Means as long as you live, may you have an active and happy life. Is a very, very important blessing which we require from the fire. So in this way, these 10 paragraphs are there. And as I already told you in the last part, Attoy Atren is the paragraph where we are shown fire acting as a judge and giving rewards and retributions to people. So Atashnyas beautifully shows us fire in the light that we should take the sacred fire as a friend, as a warrior, as a judge, and as a king. Now we come to the admonition of that the fire gives us. Just if you are standing before the fire, taking the spiritual sacred bath, what is that? At that time, you are getting spiritual bath of divine energy, khore, and you are also getting admonitions for your mind and intellect. And what is this? One is the ash or the rakhya that we are being offered, the rakhya of the fire, which we generally put on the forehead in the fire temple. It gives, the ash gives the message of equality and humility. That just as any type of wood that you offer to the fire, good dry wood, dry, properly inspected wood, it will turn to ash. And in the same way, all human beings have also to return to dust, to the basic elements. Thus, at the end, everything comes down to equality. Whether it is a wood or whether it is human being, finally, everything is equality. And generally, the reason why we apply the rakhya to the forehead, there are two reasons that generally are being offered. One is to show humility, that even ash we put on the head, that even the ash of, since we cannot touch the sacred fire, since we cannot go near the sacred fire, the offering of the sacred fire is also very important to us. And that offering we put on the head, which is the highest part of the human being. So the smallest part of the sacred fire is also very important to us. That is one of the message. And some people do believe, of course, there's an oral tradition that since there are energy centers, and one of the most important energy centers of a human being is between and above the eyebrows. That's why we apply a pinch or a grain of ash over our forehead at that point so that it helps our spiritual evolution. So the teaching from the ash is very important. We have already seen that the teaching from the wood. Another teaching from the wood is the wood burns itself. And in that process, what does it give? It gives fragrance, like if it is sukhar. All wood gives heat, all of them give light, but in the process, they burn themselves and reduce themselves to ashes. So, in the same way, there is a message to human beings that we also need to serve human beings. We need to give fragrance, heat, not in the sense of anger, but heat in the sense of warmth, love, and of course, light in the sense of knowledge and wisdom, and send, uh, uh, spread all these three among others, because finally, even we have to turn to ash, not literally but figuratively. That is, we have also to go back into the elements. Then, the process of burning something which is good and pure, it also purifies the environment, and that gives us the teaching that we in our life should keep the environment pure. Then, very important teaching of the fire. Fire defies gravity, and the flames always points upwards, and it's always almost triangular in shape. That is, at the base it is wide, at the end it is tapering. So that gives us a message that our final destiny is up there. We human beings also need to evolve and remember the final destiny of the soul, which is heavenwards. So, whenever we see a fire burning, tapering, going upwards, defying gravity, it tells us that we are also spirits and our final destiny is heaven. Then, fire is, as I told you, a link between the two worlds, and it also reminds us to become a link between the physical and the spiritual world. And finally, as I told you, fire as light spreads light. In the same way, light for human being is knowledge. The motto of my school where I studied, the Dadar Parsi Youth Assembly High School, its motto was knowledge is light. And so, literally, also, in a way, knowledge, light removes darkness and brings things to light. So, in the same way, knowledge removes ignorance and puts things into proper perspective. So, as fire is a source of light, a human being is supposed to be a source of knowledge, which dispels the darkness of ignorance. So, these are the different admonitions which in the Atashnyas we are told that fire gives admonitions. But what are those admonitions? We have just now seen them over here. So, to conclude, we should always remember that we human beings have a duty towards fire. And the first duty is to respect fire. And that respect has to translate to reverence if it's a consecrated fire, Ijaila fire, like the Agyaris and the Atash bearer. So, the way we should relate to fire has always needs to be of respect and reverence. As we respect and revere, we always say that whenever you see a person who is advanced to you in age or in knowledge or wisdom, always give respect. That is what we teach our children always. In the same way, we fire in every way helps us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and that's why we need to respect and revere it. Another duty is that we should offer it dry, fragrant, and pure wood, because by itself, fire is not able to get its food because it is not mobile. But it gives us several blessings and other benefits. So it's our duty to keep on feeding our fires. When we are going towards a person who is in position, who is in respect, we go with dignity and decorum befitting that person. Similarly, when we approach a fire, especially a sacred fire, we have to approach it with dignity and decorum. And of course, the laws of physical and mental purity that are required by the religion. And that's why we are told not to approach the fire when we are in a state of ritual impurity or ritual uncleanness. At several places in our text, we are told not to take any dead or stinking matter to the fire, not even a hair or a nail. So, that is something we have to bear in mind as long and as far as possible, as long as it is within our hands, we should never take any dead or stinking matter to the fire. In that way, indirectly, smoking is also against the fundamental idea of the Zoroastrian religion because number one, it is injurious to health. And we have always seen how important it is to maintain a good health. Tandarosti is very essential in our religion. So, smoking in one way not only gradually deteriorates the health, but when a person takes a cigarette in the mouth, indirectly the saliva and the um, fire or ember is coming into contact indirectly, not directly. So, in a way, saliva which will comes out of the mouth, we consider a naso or ajitu thing. So that's why that is also gives in a way a sort of disrespect to the fire. And one thing we have to remember, some of us have the good fortune of staying in the proximity of fire. Some of us are not so fortunate to stay in the proximity of the fire. But space is not so relevant when it comes to the blessings of the fire. And the blessings of the fire is for all, irrespective of caste, color, or creed or distance. So, whenever a sacred fire is burning, it sends its love, its warmth, its energy, its goodness, its blessings towards all those who are reverent and respectful to the fire. So, with this, we come to the end of our talk, and I hope that this has brought the concept of fire in your mind and life and has shed some more light on it than we knew it before. Thank you all very much for your patience, and thank you, AZA, for this wonderful opportunity, and the donors too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karanjia. Over to you, Kainas.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful, wonderful session. I'm sad that I could not be there for part one, but this was absolutely fascinating. We have a few questions, Uncle. First one we'll start with is a question whether the fire was brought from Navsari to Bombay by foot or in a special motor car or a vehicle.
Um, Whenever, due to unavoidable reasons, we need to transport sacred fire, there is a very, very elaborate procedure for it. The first and the most important thing is that it has to be brought by on foot or in some way the contact with mother earth, contact with earth, which in our religious terms we call paivan, that contact with the earth has to be maintained. So as far as possible it is taken walking, but when the distances are very large, it is brought by a vehicle on which iron chains are attached, and those iron chains and the vehicle goes not very fast but slow, so that iron chains maintain that contact with the earth. Secondly, if it is a sacred fire, the boy ritual has to be performed. So they keep it in mind that whenever the time of boy is there, they are able to go into a very safe place of a Zoroastrian, preferably a fire temple on the way, where they would do the boy of the fire, because giving the boy at the appropriate time is necessary. Thirdly, no natural light should fall on the fire. That's why it is specially brought in a specially made vessel where though the fire can breathe, light would not fall on it directly. Fourthly, it has to be kept away from non-Parsis, non-Zoroastrians. So in a way, they make a temporary pavi on both sides. While so two priests goes beforehand, preparing a pavi, that is a consecrated furrow on the ground. So very, very elaborate procedures are to be done. And of course, priests have to carry it, maintaining the all the priestly regalia and decorum of the fire. So it's not a very easy task. And another thing is that as far as possible, one should not cross sources of dirty water, drains, or water as such. But that sometimes becomes unavoidable. Uh, but those things have to be borne in mind. Now, these rules were not observed when the sacred fire from Aden was brought to Lonavala because it was not possible. So rather than let the sacred consecrated fire die over there, it was brought in an airplane. Of course, all the other rules which were possible were maintained, but that earthing to the ground was not possible in that case. But still, that fire burns in the Lonavala Agyari as a second fire because, as I told you, two fires can never be merged. So it burns as a separate fire with the original fire which was there in the Lonavala fire temple. So, of course, when the fire was brought from Tauri, Navsari to Mumbai, it was brought on foot. Parts of it were covered in the specially made jeep, and all the other um, requirements were fulfilled.
And so that kind of leads on to the next question is, where did the fires for the other Atas Berams come from, and were they consecrated in India?
Fires of all the 8 Atash Berams, including Iran Shah Udwada, have been consecrated in India. There is generally a misconception that we brought fire from Iran to India. The sacred fire. No, because as I said, it cannot travel on water. Consecrated fire loses its consecration on water. But we do know that, as I told you, every Zoroastrian house had a Dadga fire in the past. And that Dadga fire was considered as much a part of the family as any other human being. And so people generally, few of the people did not have the heart to leave their fire in the house. So we are told that a couple of fires were brought by those which were possible, but that those were the hearth fires from the homes, and not any sacred fire was not brought. The sacred Iransha fire was consecrated after coming from Diu to Sanjan. After 5 years, the Iransha fire's consecration process started, after all the possible permissions were taken from the local authorities. So all the fires of all the Atash Berams, all the 8 Atash Berams are performed in the vicinity and locality. And they are of course consecrated in India by scores and scores of priests. The
Interesting.
last of the fire was the Anjuman Atash Beram fire, which was consecrated almost 120 years back in Mumbai.
That's very interesting. This is a very practical sort of question, the next one, that, in many houses, there is the traditional oil devo, which is burning 24/7 in many houses. And the question is, should the devo always be in an oil one, or can you use an alternative like paraffin with a fiberglass wick, which essentially lasts for days and days and days, and there's no sort of soot when it burns? So Kaivan is interested in your perspective, whether that's permissible or not.
Kaivan, frankly, I'm absolutely ignorant about this paraffin diva with a fiberglass wick. I don't know anything about it, so I can't comment.
It's basically, actually, I've got one here. If just 1 minute, I'll show you. So it's basically the paraffin liquid inside, and there's a fiberglass wick. And that's how the diva is on for about 8, in my case, about 8 days.
But is paraffin something natural or what is it? Is it a chemical? Because what is paraffin? Kaiwan?
It is basically kerosene, sort of kerosene, a purified form of kerosene, basically.
Okay. See, what I know is that we have to use natural oil, something which is more natural. Now we know that oil is extracted from nuts or flowers or plants or trees. So it is, I think, closer to nature than perhaps paraffin. I don't know about the health implications because, as I know, kerosene, at least when you burn kerosene, the soot is not good for the health, as far as I know. Uh, so I can't. I'll study the issue and may get back to you. But presently, I think that the oil diva, because it is more natural than paraffin, and perhaps because of the health benefit is, perhaps because of its health benefit, I feel it is preferable. But I'll look into it. I'll study the issue.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Ramiyar.
Question is praying the Atasniyash to the diva as an alternative to fire would perhaps invoke the same blessings, and also visualizing the fires with the fires at the Atasperams or the Agyaris and the Dadgas in your mind would invoke those blessings. We just want your confirmation on that, whether that is indeed what happens.
One needs to be practical. We like cooked food. All of us like cooked food, right? Home cooked, garam food. But when that is not available, we make do with alternatives, which sometimes are palatable, sometimes are not so palatable. But we have to make do with alternatives. Sometimes even with tinned and canned food. So like that, the best alternative is a fire. But when a fire is not available, we have to be practical. And of course, when you visualize a fire and a devo is burning before you, you can of course do the atashnyas and say your prayers. As I told you before also, there's a very beautiful saying by our wise Parsi ancestors. Chare tokshak or chare khwarsandi. I think I told this before also. Chare tokshak means when it is possible, try your best to get that thing. Achare khwarsandi means when it is not possible, be contented with what you have. So I think that should be the perspective in all these things.
Very wise, absolutely. The question also leading on from that is, when you pray the Niyash at the end, we are asked to face the Qibla or the fire or the Diva after praying in the south. For Yash, that is not mentioned. Why would that be so?
I think we may have dealt with this before, so pardon me if I'm repeating, but there is a difference between the Nyash and the Yash. The Nyash are prayers to creations, whereas the Yash are prayers to divine beings, to Yazads and Ameshaspans. So when we are praying a Nyash, it is presumed that you are facing the creation while praying. So if you are praying Kaushit Mehr Nyas, it is the sun. If Mahabhakta Nyas, if possible, the moon. If Ava Nyas, water. And if Atash Nyas, fire or Diva. So in the Dadare Gyan, the last two lines again bring you back to that creation. So when you are praying the Nyash, you are supposed to go back to that creation, facing the creation. But while you are praying the Yash, you are dedicating the prayer to the Yazad or the Ameshastra, which they continue to stay with the Dadare Gyan, means in the house of God. So that's why while saying the Yash, you continue to pray the last two lines, facing south, believing that the Yazads and Ameshaspas are with Aura Mazda in the Dadare Gyan. Whereas while praying the Nyash, especially the Atash Nyash, since you are praying to the creation, And since you are facing the creation while praying, you have again got to face back to the relevant creation to which you are praying. So I hope that answers the question.
Certainly. The next question is quite interesting. So again, it's Kaivan. On a couple of occasions, he's seen some people switching off PowerPoints with their shoes or their feet instead of bending down and switching it off with their hands. And in his opinion, electricity is a form of fire, and then therefore it may be a sin. And whilst he's pointed this out to certain people, they've just laughed and he's unable to convince them. So what are your thoughts with regard to shutting off PowerPoints?
First, let me understand the question. I have seen people switching off PowerPoints, that's electric light,
Yeah.
with their shoes or their feet instead of bending down to switch it off with their hands. Now, I think everything has, according to me, some form of life or the other. So I would not imagine using my foot for any reason. So I think switching off even the electric light with a foot, I don't know what harm is there in touching it, unless one has some back problem and one can't bend down. So one can use a stick or something to switch the light off or use that thing as a thing. But I think one should refrain from using one's shoes or one's feet or kicking anything. You should not even kick a stone. When I see children kicking empty bottles and stones, I tell them not to do so, because that is in a way disrespectful to something or the other. Of course, we play football, and you can't say you can't play football because that's a sport by itself. So that's another point. But if without a purpose, if you are doing it, I think we should refrain from doing anything, because we should respect the life in everything. There is life, there is God, we say, in everything. And that attitude comes out when you use that sort of a thing for fulfilling certain tasks.
That's a fair point. Another comment, so to speak, is that someone has seen non-Zoroastrians praying outside of our fire temples and even offering sukkah. Do you have any sort of comment or thoughts with regard to that happening?
Yeah, of course. That is a wonderful thing. That shows the respect and reverence non-Zoroastrians have for our fire. They respect the rules of not coming, but they still want to give a gift to the fire, which is not at all wrong. In a way, there is a story. I don't know whether you may have heard it or not. I don't know whether it is true or not also. But it was said that the Iransha fire, an Indian king asked the priest to pray to the fire. At that time, it was still not at Udwada. To pray to the sacred fire that he have a son. To pray for him. A local king, an Indian king, was not able to get a child, a male heir. And he believed that because the sacred fire of the Zoroastrian is there somewhere in the vicinity, he requested the priest to pray to his sacred fire if he can get an heir. And truly enough, the priest did say prayers, not Duat Andarostia. Please don't quote me that a priest said Duat Andarosti for an Indian king. But just a wish, okay, may this person get what he wants, oh sacred fire. And it said that true enough, that king got an heir, a male child. So the thing is, what I want to say is, and that king, then it is said that gave the gift of land where a fire temple can be made. And we should not forget that Jadav Rana, who gave us refuge, it was he who gave us the place in Sanjan for the Atash Bera, where it burned for 700 years. So it's not that we are fire has got anything against non-Zoroastrians. It's just that even we Zoroastrians observe rules and regulations. Even we can't go near the sacred fire. when we are not in a state of ritual purity. So I think there is nothing wrong in non-Zoroastrians having a love, a respect, and a reverence for our sacred fire. And I see that happening even in our local fire temple. I see so many non-Zoroastrians standing outside and bowing outside, asking the priest to offer sandalwood. That happens very normally. And I don't think there is anything wrong in that. I think, in fact, it's something very beautiful.
So when you say offering sukhar, Ramya uncle, just to clarify, if that non-Zoroastrian gives a Zoroastrian who's going into the temple, for instance, some sukhar to charao on the fire, is that permissible?
See, in that case, you are not sure of the ritual purity of that fire, of that person.
Okay.
Okay. So, in that sense, you can either take it out of respect and keep it aside for some months and then offer it if that is possible. Because we know that, see, when you buy sandalwood, the people who cut sandalwood, they are non-Parsis. The people who transport it are non-Parsis. The people who bear it in gunis are non-Parsis. Nowadays, even sellers are non-Parsis. All these Parsi shops like Chimanlal and their shops also sell sandalwood. So we do know that non-Zoroastrians do handle sandalwood. But at very point of time, just before offering, we believe that the sandalwood has to be pure. Now we can't ask the non-Zoroastrian whether he is in a state of, he or she is in a state of ritual purity. So that should be avoided when he is personally giving.
Sure.
But when that person gives money, that buy it from the shop and offer it. Buy it from the shop in a fire temple and offer it. So that is very much done. But when a person, I'm very doubtful that a non-Zoroastrian would physically bring sukkar, because it is very difficult for him to get a sukkar. But
Sure.
if that is happening, then we should refrain from it, because we don't know that at that point of time that person is physically pure or not.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Question is the fire in Yazd Stash Beram or Aderan? The fire in Yazd.
Yazd Atash Beram is a very, very special Atash Beram. Technically, if you go to see, we can call it an Atash Beram because it was consecrated as an Atash Beram in Iran. And in that sense, it is older even than Iran Shah. It is almost more than 2000 years old. But because of the conditions in Iran, the rules and regulations that we have over here about ritual purity and about the offering of boy 5 times a day, those are not being observed, unfortunately, in Iran, at least in the last 50 to 70 years. So in that sense, technically, it cannot be called an Atash Beram. But out of sheer respect, because for 2000 years, it has burnt as an Atash Beram with all the proper regime, offerings, and looking after. So as a mark of respect for it, we still call it an Atash Beram. Though, as I said, technically it ceases to be an Atash Beram if the boy is not given to it 5 times a day. But presently, it is the Pacha Sahib is under much pain itself. So when we go to it, when I go to it, I still pray to it as an Atash Beram. In my heart and mind, it is still an Atash Beram. Though, as I said, it's in the last 50 years, it has lost that technical stand of being an Atash Beram.
Understand. Thank you. And that concludes the Q&A. Thank you very much. I'll hand over again to Parveen Aunty just to close the session. But Rami Uncle, as always, thank you so very much for enlightening us on such a wonderful topic. Parveen Aunty, I'll let you close the session.
Thank you, Kailas. That was, as usual, a very good Q&A session. And thank you, Dr. Karanjia, for yet again another very enlightening talk. We really look forward to your talks every month, especially me. Thank you. And thank you to all of you who've joined us. And please come again next month.
Thank you. Yes, done, Panaba.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye
Yes,
bye.
done.